In a town 58,000 strong, there moved a foreigner. He was a Jewish man from the ocean, yet he traveled to a land with no water to find a new life. He arrived upon plains so big, you could only call it the middle of nowhere. Now, live from a land so vast, this is his cast.
Oh, the humanity.
Cowboys, cowgirls, studs, mares, and farmers of all ages. This is the middle of nowhere cast with your host, Robby.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I get to talk to my own mayor today. This is cool. What does it feel like being a mayor?
Well, this is my third time being mayor of Casper, and so I feel like it's been a good journey, and so it's not my first rodeo per se, but in the same context, anytime you become mayor of any city, it's certainly a honor, but it's also a responsibility that you have to carry to represent the city, being able to do that. So it's good. There's some challenges, and so there's always those things that happen that are not always easy, but I've appreciated being able the opportunity to serve as mayor of Casper.
Right on. I guess I should introduce you, Ray Pacheco.
Yeah.
Mayor Ray Pacheco.
Thank you.
Of Casper. You know who I am. You mentioned a lot of power. Comes great responsibility. Spider-Man stuff. How do you shoulder that responsibility? Like, you're the head of a lot of people.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we look at is we have a great staff, and so one of the things that I always point out, like our city manager, who helps run the day-to-day operations of the city, which is a huge benefit, and so he really does help with that. So that helps to shoulder a lot of that issues and a lot of the things that happen in Casper. So the staff is fantastic. I would also say that I try to take care of myself, self-care. I know that's a buzzword right now, but self-care. And I'm a therapist by trade. I'm a counselor. And so I really kind of look at how do we work to take care of ourselves and being able to. I'm not always perfect, but I do that. My family is really supportive. My wife has been very supportive throughout my career involved in government.
Do you ever feel like a heavy burden of responsibility that if shit hits the fan, it's on you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and it's happened several times, right? It's not like I live in a vacuum and it's just perfect, right? Like today, we're getting ready, or next week we're getting ready to go into our budget session, and
that's fun.
We're looking into the idea of having to make cuts because of property tax cuts that were made in the state legislature this year.
SFO 69.
Yeah,
I want to ask you about that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And so we're looking at making some decisions, right, this year to make cuts, and so that's been a challenge. And then there's been other challenges that we face and have to work through, and so navigating that is not always easy.
Yeah. What was I going to ask? Oh, you said something that had a question. Whatever. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
Or it won't. And that's fine too, I guess. Pitch. A lot of people have no idea what Casper is and what Wyoming is when they watch this. Pitch your city to them. What goes on here? I live here. It's an awesome place. I love it. Why do you love it? You've lived here your whole life.
I have. I was born and raised here. Went to all the local schools here. Got my master's degree from the University of Wyoming. And so I love Wyoming and I love Casper, and that's why I came back. Raised my kids here. And so Casper to me has always been a home where people are genuinely good people and genuinely want the best for everybody and generally want that to make Casper the best. We certainly have our differences in the community politically, et cetera. But I think within that same context, Casper has a great support system within the recreation, business support here, lower taxes, obviously in the state of Wyoming. So if you're a business owner, the benefits also of the tourism here in Casper has grown within the last 20 years. Cool. David Street Station, we're the central hub for like the Casper Event Center. We just built the ranch. So, CNFR is here. So we have a lot of amenities. We have a lot of things that we invest in as a city.
Speaking of that political division, so you have a good example of that, I feel like, is Mayor Machado over in Evansville.
Yep.
I was able to talk to her.
Sure, yeah.
She is a staunchly progressive Democratic mayor of like the most conservative Republican village
Definitely.
in America.
I agree with that.
How does she make that work? And then, do you run into that kind of stuff as mayor yourself?
Sure.
What can you draw from her leadership
Sure.
and implement it into yours?
So a couple things. That's a great question, because I think when we look at, especially at the city level, it's nonpartisan. And that doesn't negate the fact that we don't run into political ideologies when we're involved, right?
Of course.
And so from my standpoint, in my career and being a part of local government, which I love local government, is that it's nonpartisan in the sense we don't run on a ticket, right? Or we don't run on establish what our political identifications are.
Right. What's yours?
No, you can ask.
Okay.
No, I'm more than happy to talk about
sick.
that too.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm an open book, and so
Right on.
I think more transparency is something, and more honest conversations with politicians instead of trying to come up with going like this and trying to say what people want to hear, and that's not my style. And so
I like that. That's what we're doing here.
yeah. So I'm a Republican, and
Cool.
and so I tend to be, I subscribe more to the ideology that I tend to be a moderate or a centrist, which is a dying.
It feels like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a really cool ideology that I really kind of began to really embrace. It's called radical centrism. And radical centrism, by its definition, and the word radical doesn't mean it's radical, but what it means is how do we take the best from both sides? Because what's happened is we've become into this hyper tribalistic political ideology.
Yeah, for sure.
Where we're in two different camps, and so there's no level for us to have a conversation, because if I'm obviously super liberal, you're wrong because you're super conservative.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is that we suffer, the citizens suffer.
And it makes no sense, because it's like people are blind to what they actually think and what's good for them, and they just care what their party says that they should do.
Right.
Like Teslas, they were the libtards like 4 months ago,
Right,
and
yeah.
now you're only going to see a Trump flag on one of those things.
And that's
so, like,
and that's how things have moved, right? If you look at even the political state and the ideological state of the state of Wyoming, right? And so the things that we look at, and I think what we've also forgotten is how to have a respectful conversation where you and I can, let's just say you and I disagree politically and ideologically and even faith, right? But we can have an honest conversation to say, you know what, I understand where you're coming from. I disagree with you.
Yeah.
This is where I'm standing from. And then we can walk away and shake hands.
And we all want the same thing. I think the main difference between two level-headed people on either side is that we have different ways we want to go about getting to the same end goal.
And that's really
Right?
radical centrism. The whole ideology around radical centrism is that we all have a goal. We all know which way we need to go. And sometimes it's not going to be 100% my ideas, but it could also be a mix of how we do those things. And compromise and centrism and moderatism have become a bad word because we've so created these divisions.
You have to be this.
You have
to be
exactly.
that.
And I just don't think that that's, look at the quagmire that we see within the in Congress and federal government, and even how things have happened within our state legislature. And so that far right, that Freedom Caucus.
You are so good at segueing into all my questions here. Where are you at on the Freedom Caucus? Also, briefly, for people who don't know, because they don't follow Wyoming state politics, which is fair if you don't live here, the Freedom Caucus is like the far right branch of our state legislature that want to do pretty much fill in the blank crazy right wing thing, and they want to do it.
Yeah.
Is that, if that's fair enough?
It is, and so to me, I'm pragmatic. I think things, and I know that things are not always going to be easy, but I also understand the level of the way Wyoming has been and always been is that our individual decisions, local control, those types of stuff are so critical to how we do things. So, case in point, Freedom Caucus decided to pass that bill to cut property taxes, right? So the understanding that we get that people need tax cuts, I would like to tax cut, but here's the ramification of that. It has consequences. I'm going to be dropping a video probably tomorrow on Facebook talking about the cuts that we have to do, right? And so that's the reality of a property tax cut that affects not only the city, but the county, the school districts, all those things.
Yeah. How do you rationalize living in Wyoming, which is like, I see this more of as a libertarian brand of conservatism where everybody wants to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
How do you rationalize, like, you're a mayor, you need taxes to do your job.
100%.
How do you rationalize the two? Like, I need money from you. At the same time, I recognize everybody in the city wants to be left alone.
So unfortunately for municipalities, we don't have very many avenues.
Yeah.
We rely on enterprise funds, meaning water and utilities and things like that, right? For some type of generation of income. The only other source that we do is taxes. And so we share taxes, the sales tax with the county, or excuse me, with the state. I think it's roughly around 30%, and then they get about 65 to 70%.
I've always actually wondered how that goes on, because I have no idea how you guys make money. It's insane. You don't take anything from me.
Right, and so we have really low taxes in the state of Wyoming. So with the municipalities, and this can even go back to local control, when we look at that, and then they put a hindrance on how we as a local community can vote on 5th cent or the 6th cent tax. That's our right. And then if the constituents in our community and in our municipality don't want those, then they can vote against that. But if you restrict,
like they did in the last election.
Correct. And if you look at the state legislature coming down and giving edicts to say, oh, by the way, you can't do that, and even further, and I know I'm kind of being broad, or I'm kind of just going all over the place, but even further, we've had the belief system that the state has always said the federal government should stay out of our business.
Yeah, that's for
And in
sure.
the same context, it should be that the state should stay out of local government as well.
Okay,
and so,
I see.
And so it doesn't mean that they can't be partners. We should be partners. But don't tell us what we need to do. And that's a very libertarian ideology, right? And so that's very much that we've lost that, especially with the Freedom Caucus that's come in.
Why? No, but the freedom, like, in my mind, the furthest right people should want that the most. Why don't they?
That's exactly what's happened, though. This is
like, why, you see why I'm, and also at the same time, everybody that's all like, government stay out of my life, government stay out of my life, they're using the roads, they're using your water, they're using your electricity, they use all of that. Do they not realize that?
They do, but here's what's happened within the last 20 to 30 years. So years ago, if you had taken a look at the way politics or how government had functioned, it was government, stay out of the way. Allow things, stay out of our business. We have the right to do these things. Then there was a shift to become more of this understanding that government should play a bigger role in mandating certain things, whether it's books or which, that we've been talking about quite a bit. Banning books within school districts and doing those things. That what's happened is that they've become the opposite of what we have believed as conservatives and what we believed as traditional Republicans like myself that believe that stay out of our way, stay out of our government.
Let us do our jobs kind of thing. And it's gone both ways, because the liberal side of things, like, they used to be working class, rah-rah, and now that's no longer what they want. Now it feels like you're elite if you're a Democrat.
Right.
So,
and that's another thing, right? It's just almost like it's switched.
Yeah, and that's why it's just like, it's whoever's in charge gets to say what. It's like, that's not how it works.
Right.
Stop changing. And then what am I supposed to do as a young kid, 26? I've only been politically able to vote for 8 years.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell has the last 8 years gotten me? So
absolutely.
I don't freaking know.
I want to be clear, and I want to recognize the fact that the way government is functioned, I would agree that there is levels that could be streamlined, that could be better transparency, have these honest conversations like this. Because I think, to me, being a statesman is a
cool title.
Right.
It's kind of badass.
Yeah,
I'll give you that. That's awesome.
So being a statesman means that you're worried about the next generation.
Oh, so I could be a statesman too.
Yes.
Not just a mayor thing.
What a politician is they're worried about the next election.
Oh.
So
whoa, that's good.
What I like about that is that when we begin to worry about next elections, then we kind of edit ourselves, or we don't say the things that we believe in, or we don't do those things. And to me, I'm not worried about a next election. What I'm worried about is the honest conversations around, hey, look, you and I are disagreeing on this. I don't agree with what the Freedom Caucus is doing. I feel like it's not the same as traditional conservatism. And so to me, having those honest conversations and being like, no, I'm going to go to the mat for my community.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool. A wise man at the park once told me we should make decisions for 7 generations out. And if it'll work 7 generations out, it's probably something worthwhile to pursue today.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly the way that we need to start reframing this idea of what does it mean to be policymakers. Mm-hmm. And to me, being in 12 years in the city council, serving as mayor several times, has always been an honor and a responsibility that I don't take for granted. And it's not about my personal beliefs per se. It's more about how do we work together for the best benefit of the community.
I like that. Let's find something we disagree on and hash it out.
Sure.
Okay, let's do it. This should be easy. Okay, so all right, I'll just. What do you think we could find? I'm historically, I'm a big city boy. I'm probably liberal, but I do like. No, I'm definitely a liberal, but I like about Casper and Wyoming that brand of like just stop like. If I want, in Philadelphia, you can't buy sodas more than 64 ounces now.
Oh wow!
I don't see why anybody would.
Yeah.
But I'm like, if I want to buy a 128 ounce Big Gulp from 7-Eleven, I should be able to do that.
Correct.
So, okay, yeah, so like that.
I can
thank you for that. So your city has taught me that there more of a middle ground is so, okay, but let's find something we disagree on. So hash it out. All right, I want to talk to you about this. I was saving it for later, but we can do it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we decriminalize weed in Casper? And if your answer is yes, then we agree. So we'll find something else.
Yeah. So that's a great topic. I don't agree with that.
Oh, okay. Let's get into it. Why the hell not?
So I will say as a therapist and as a counselor, I will recognize that there are therapeutic benefits for certain individuals. And I've had clients that do use it.
Okay.
And I think there are benefits around pain management. I think there's benefits around.
How do you, as a brief aside, what do you do if a client tells you they're doing it? Because you're also a mayor. Head of law and order, and they tell you they're doing something illegal, and you just keep that to yourself?
Yeah, no, well, absolutely. And for me, I step into my therapeutic room.
And then this is okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So there's a huge distinction, right?
Yeah.
And I'm able to do that. So when a conversation comes around like that, it's one of those things where I meet the client where they're at, right?
Sure.
And understand that this is where they need to be and this is what they're, doing. And if that's something that they therapeutically are doing, that's what they have to do. It's like that whole thing about this is your decision, this is your choice, and you have to make those decisions. Now for me, I think with what I just said about the therapeutic sides of it, I think are benefits within that. And I would always be open for municipal purpose use of it.
Okay.
I think that I would support that 100%. The decriminalization of it for me is difficult because I think my belief is let's say you go down to Denver, right? And so Denver, you spend a lot of time, you smell it everywhere, that's happening.
Yeah.
And so for me, it would be hard for me to justify to say, okay, look, would it be a good tax thing for the state and for the city? Absolutely, I could see that benefit. But to me, I think that the level of what marijuana can bring into the community is difficult for me to justify making it legal.
Well, it could.
And I'd love to hear what you have to say.
What do you mean by what it can bring into the community?
I think that there are, and I can't quote specific data, which I don't try to say things that are without data.
I respect that. That's good.
So anecdotally, what we've heard when we've had other police chiefs and other people that have come to Casper to talk to us and present to the council has been things like, if we could look back at it, we would not have decriminalized it because of the crime that they see that has increased because of it. Now, let me say this. I'm not saying that marijuana makes everybody a criminal. I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
But I think that some people have made that suggestion, and I know that if you talk to most law enforcement agencies, they would prefer not to decriminalize it, which I get.
But what is keeping it legal do? I just don't, because one of my biggest problems with its illegal state status is that I don't feel like you're really doing anything good for the community. If a dude just smokes a joint, goes for a walk, and now he's in jail because he wasn't bothering anybody, like that's kind of messed up.
No, I do agree, because let's take a comparison. Let's make the comparison of prohibition in the 1920s, right? And so they prohibited it, And then we saw illegal actions. We saw those types of things. So
Yeah.
what I can get behind, what I can understand, the level of trying to make marijuana legal and decriminalizing it, is that would that then make the less, the arrest for the misdemeanors and things like that based
Yeah.
upon how much marijuana you have or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not saying, if you're drug dealing, sure, go to jail.
Yeah.
But I want just like, I'm advocating for just like the standard guy. He can, public spaces, sure, keep it illegal. What
Sure.
about just in my basement? Can't why do I have to feel like the cops are going to knock down the door if I'm in my basement smoking a J, watching Avengers?
And I do agree with you on that point. And this is where radical centrist comes in.
Yeah.
And the conversations like that is when we start talking, and then I start to hear what you're saying, and I start to see your point of view.
Because it changes it from just like let's become
Right.
Denver. Yeah.
Instead of me sitting there and just like pushing and being like, okay, I still believe that it should be illegal. I wouldn't decriminalize it, but I can understand where you're coming from in the sense of police and the law enforcement shouldn't be able to walk in, unless you have a warrant to do that.
Yeah.
But the question is if somebody wants to do that even today when it's illegal and they want to sit in their basement and do it, that's their right to do it. It's illegal outside, right?
There's two other main problems I have with it, which is why the hell is the government telling me what I can and can't put in my
I
body?
agree. I
I'm
agree
an
with
adult.
that.
I should be able to make that decision. And then the second is I feel like a lot of the times it's just used as like, it's used to profile people and target people, get them in jail on the weed thing because
I can see what you're saying.
because if you look at the arrest logs coming out in the Turner County Detention Center, the amount of simple possession charges, kids ending up in there for and hate to say it this way, but they're all black. So I'm not seeing any white kids getting arrested for it. So then that also doesn't seem fair for me as an advocate of equal rights.
Yeah, and I know Councilor Gamroth. I don't know if you've talked to him.
Oh, I have not.
You
Maybe I
should. You should.
Okay.
He's been a strong advocate for the legalization of marijuana, and so he's been a strong advocate. And I don't think he'd care if I said that. But I think having that conversation with him, I think would also be a real benefit to you, as somebody on city council who has talked a lot about that. And so there's not much we can do, right, from an ordinance standpoint. We have to do what the state statute. No, we can't. So that's a great.
But like in Philly, sorry to cut you off.
No.
In Philly, they decriminalized it in the city before it was legal in the state. They could do that.
So we can't. So we have to. We cannot change it in the state of Wyoming. We have to follow the state statute that comes in. We can't decriminalize it.
Could you not tell your police chief to not arrest people for simple possession or simple use?
I would say.
In theory, not saying you would, but why couldn't you in theory do that?
We could tell our chief to not do that.
Yeah.
But that's also.
He was also against it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mayor Machado was not.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't know. I might have to
definitely.
move to Evansville.
Yeah, exactly. But I think within that context of understanding where like Chief Cheney would come through and say, hey, look, this is not a good thing for the city of Casper. And so could we tell the chief to be like, hey, don't worry about that? We could say it, but I don't think that would be appropriate for us to tell the law enforcement what to do and how to do their things from the city council standpoint. And so it's not our purview to dictate the courts or to dictate to the police department to do those things.
So then removing yourself from the dialogue, like putting your opinion, if let's say your opinion is equal to that of one constituent, if the city of Casper, if everybody in Casper said, hey, this is something we wanted done, would you do it in spite of that?
As far as if the city wanted, if they said, hey, we want to legalize.
Let's say, everybody shows up to town hall meetings and they're like, let's get this legalized, let's get it done.
Right.
You're a mayor, we're going to you.
So again, I couldn't do that based upon the council making an ordinance based on let's open it and let's make it decriminalized. What it is that we would have to go to the state legislature to lobby and to say to them, hey, change the state statute, which has happened several times. Almost every cycle within the state legislature, there's usually someone that usually goes to the legislature to introduce a bill to legalize marijuana. And so that does happen, but there's always the pushback based upon people that say, no, we don't want to do legalization of it. And so that really, it's been about more of a state statute that we can't do anything is the problem. It's like abortion, right? We cannot. We've had people come into Casper or have come to the city council meetings, especially with Wellsprings, right? That can do abortion and they have a clinic for women's health.
Yeah.
They come to city council and say, you need to do something about it. Well, we can't because it's based upon state statute and federal government that we cannot do anything.
Right.
And so those are the problems that we're limited within that context.
Do we disagree on abortion too? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good conversation. I'm pro-life, and so it's one of those things.
I'm not. We disagree.
No,
okay,
no,
that's
no,
cool.
That's good. No, I like that. I appreciate that we can disagree on it. I am pro-life, but I make this distinction that one, I'm a Catholic, right?
Sure.
And so
Jewish, we disagree.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
How about that? I think I might be your only Jewish constituent, by the way.
Yeah.
I haven't met any other people.
Yeah, there's
here.
very few, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So for me, as a pro-life Catholic, I believe in the understanding that life is sacred from womb to tomb.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
here's my context. If we're going to be pro-life as a people, especially with our ideology, then we need to be pro-life across the board. So
Yeah.
let me explain. So if we're going to be pro-life for infants, then we're pro-life for individuals that are suffering poverty.
What about the individual that would argue, the individual is me, that you're not really pro-life for infants because once they come out, we're doing so much work to protect the kids in the womb. Then when they come out, if they're born in an impoverished neighborhood, we don't do anything for them, really.
And this is where I'm going.
Oh, okay.
So this is where I'm going
Sure.
with it. If we're going to be pro-life at birth or before birth, then we need to also be pro-life when we fight for the injustice of poverty, when we fight for the injustice of individuals that don't have housing. We need to fight for the injustice of a just wage. We need to fight for individuals that are in the LGBTQ community that are treated not as human, but they need to be treated with dignity, respect, and love and compassion.
Yeah.
If we are pro-life, if we are truly pro-life, then that is what we fight for. It just cannot be one
That's
way.
only one part of a bigger problem, then, is what you're saying.
And that has been my stance. I was a youth minister early on in my career. I taught at St. Anthony's. I was the dean of students at St. Anthony's. The Catholic Church has a rich history called Catholic social teaching that teaches about dignity, respect, love, and compassion for every individual, including not only babies that are before they're born, but all the way to the elderly that need to be treated with dignity.
Okay, so you hold two truths, which I see. That one, people should be able to have the right of self-determination. That's the conservative, liberal,
Right.
Libertarian stance.
Right.
But also now, a woman can't choose to abort a child if she has it. How
Sure.
do you justify imposing that sanction on half
Yeah.
of the population
No,
while holding true that everybody
Yeah.
should have the right to self-determination?
yeah, and I think that's a contradiction, right? I think
it is.
let's just, we can call it what it is, right?
Sure.
And so I think that that's okay to have the contradiction. Now, can we look at saying that we have opposing, or that we can have a contradiction within our belief systems? Absolutely. So here's where things, for me, can cross. To me, it's the idea of that as when I see the sanctity of life and my faith and what that does, right? And what I believe is true, and understanding that, yes, women will make, if it's legal, they're going to make that choice. If it's legal, right? And so,
If it's illegal, they'll make that choice too, though.
well, yeah. And so, right now, currently in the state of Wyoming,
Yeah.
it is legal based upon what the court has said.
The Supreme Court said that, yeah, you have the right to make your own decisions when
Correct.
it comes to health, which is
Right.
in our Constitution.
Right. And so, which the state legislature was trying to, basically, they tried to pass a law saying, no, we're going to make our own decision here, right? And so when we look at a woman's right to choose, if it's legal, then it's legal. And there's nothing that I can do about it, right?
Yeah.
If it's legal. That's their choice. That's the choice that they do it. Now, to your point, I
Yeah.
agree with this. If it's illegal, I think it's still going to happen, whether they go to another place, if they do it in a very unsafe way,
Yeah.
and things like that, right? And so I think those are moral questions too.
Yeah, because
You know what I mean?
that's not good. If you have to do it dangerously or at your own home,
Yeah.
then that's, you know,
Yeah.
why not, knowing that people are going to do it regardless?
Yeah.
Maybe same thing argument with weed. Why
Yeah.
not just make it legal and make it safer
Sure.
for them to do?
And I think a couple clarifications too is that when it comes to rape and incest, I'm definitely
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that. I understand, especially if a 10-year-old is raped or has incest or something,
Yeah,
molested or something like that. 100% within that context. And I understand that. So in cases of rape and incest and things like that, I'm definitely understanding that we can't just say, sorry, across the board, you're 10 years old and you need to carry a baby and then
that's
and
pretty
be able
horrible.
to do that.
Yeah, that's okay. That just
So-
means you're a human being. then, I
Right,
think.
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
cool.
So I think for me though, my faith really does come into that play, that if I truly want to be pro-life, then I need to be pro-life across the board. It does go in contradiction to the fact of like that libertarian, go ahead,
Yeah.
stay out of.
I'll also push back on you on, we do have this thing in this great country called separation of church and state.
I agree.
So if you are basing your argument for why you're pro-life on the foundation of religious belief, I see conflict there too. Why do you think, not it gives you the right, that sounds like,
No.
I'm on a high horse, but
No.
what gives you the right to make,
Yeah.
I'm Jewish, there's agnostic people in Casper, there's Buddhist people in Casper. Why are you enforcing your faith-based morals on everybody else in this realm?
And I think that's a very powerful conversation to have. That you're absolutely right. We can't dictate our religious beliefs on it, and so on people. And I recognize that. I understand where you're coming from on that.
Like, can you separate in your home, your religion? You should be able to do what you want, right?
Yeah.
It's not right for me, but can you separate that from? I'm also
Yeah.
the mayor of a secular society in this greater America. People need to be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I 100% hear what you're saying, and it is hard.
Yeah.
So let me give you a great example of this.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to turn
Yeah.
the conversation, but it's in the same line.
Okay.
As a social worker, that's what I am. I am LCSW. I practice social work ethics. I see the social work standpoint. So here's the quandary. Here's the quandary that a lot of social workers face. If you are pro-life, you are faith-based, you do all those things, but somebody comes into your offices and you're a social worker and you're practicing the conversation around. So say somebody comes in, a young woman comes in and says, I'm thinking about getting an abortion, and I'm a social worker, and we're talking about it. We have to navigate the fact that we have to meet our clients where they're at,
Yeah.
right? And so as a social worker, I cannot sit there and have the conversation to be like, well, my faith tells me you shouldn't do this. Unless I'm a Christian counselor. That's a whole other story.
Right. You go to a priest, you get the Catholic
Right.
response. Totally get that.
But to me, as a social worker and understanding my core competencies is also meeting my clients where they're at and understanding that I can't dictate it. Does that go in contradiction to my faith within the city government and within the state within that? I can recognize that, but I have so much conviction around the idea that life is life and that life should be protected.
Yeah.
And I think that's a moral question. I don't even know if it's a faith-based question for me, that it's more about how do we protect life across the board.
I honestly think that we can find common ground. I agree with you there, because I also think life is important and we protect it. It's hard because it's the one issue that I can't rationally justify my own position even though I feel it. So it's hard because I agree with the pro-life sentiment.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
But then I also think, like, how moral are we as a society? We got a lot of problems. That's okay with me if we're still doing that.
Yeah, and
I can't make an argument for why it's moral to have an abortion, but
Right.
we do shitty shit all the time.
Oh
so.
yeah, and I think to that point that you made.
Sorry, I'm cursing in the mayor's
Oh,
office.
I could care less.
Oh yeah, let's go.
I've heard worse.
That's cool. We're really on the come up now. Okay, yeah.
But I think for the fact that when we look at our own personal beliefs, I think no matter what, our personal beliefs are always going to infiltrate and permeate into how we do our policies, how we do those things. and I think we have to constantly grow. We have to constantly evolve and think about that. Just like the Catholic Church, right? Before Vatican II, it was Latin, and the priest didn't face when they were doing the Eucharist, didn't face the church, right? And then after Vatican II, things began to open up, right? And so the church began to evolve. And so I think that as we embrace that as people, looking at and trying to embrace the idea that what do we do and how do we give policy that's thoughtful and understanding of people and meet them where they're at. And so it's hard for me because beyond a faith base, for me, life is important from womb to tomb. And so that's kind of where I really look at it for. So.
Why can't politicians do a better job ever of saying, I believe one thing, I'm on this column, but I want to do, I'm an elected representative supposed to represent my constituents, right?
Oh, yeah.
Why can't, I never feel like I'm being asked by like Barrasso, for example, how I feel about something. And I don't think that he represents me very well at all.
Yeah.
Obviously me, because I'm who I am, but I also, I have no interest in coming here and changing the way you guys have been doing things for hundreds of years.
No.
I live in this community, I respect and I love your guys' way of life.
Yeah. But
you
should never not feel like you can't challenge it, because
well, I don't know. I feel like there's like I'm not gonna come here and say you guys can't own guns anymore. If I moved back to Los Angeles, and I totally get that critique.
Yeah.
And also, you know what I mean? Like, just as they wouldn't, California people don't want Wyoming people coming there. Like, we can coexist and say, oh, you want those rules, you stay there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I do feel like, no matter where you are, the politicians aren't doing what the constituents want. They're doing what they think is best because they think it is.
Right. 2 points, which I do agree with this, because there's that balance between how do you be a democratic representative, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, you're a representative democracy.
Yes.
You represent the people. But I also have to understand that sometimes you make the decisions. I'm going to give you an example.
Okay. This is good because you are a mayor. You're the person.
Yeah,
you are somebody who does this.
So that doesn't negate the fact that you have to make decisions that sometimes are going to go against what constituents want. So here, let me give you an example. A few years ago, when I was mayor at that time too, we had looked at creating an ordinance because the state of Wyoming does not have an anti-hate crimes bill. And so what we did is we just said, okay, how can we create some type of non-discrimination ordinance that criminalizes the idea that you can't treat individuals like LGBTQ+, like people of color, people of different religions. So how do we create this?
That's awful nice of you.
Yeah. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, as someone that sees pro-life is beyond the understanding of just birth, right, of babies, but all the way across of how we treat people with dignity and respect. That was something that got a lot of pushback within our community, right? Because I think there's a lot of stances within faith and things like that. I supported it, and I wanted to craft that type of legislation because I think it's important, because I don't care where you stand morally on a decision like people that are in the LGBTQ community. To me, that's not neither here nor there.
Right.
What it is, it's more about how do we treat everybody with love and respect and dignity and compassion.
Yeah, there's something that when I was talking to one of the school board candidates, did not get elected. When we were talking about what kind of discussions and topics can be taught in schools and talked about in schools, the LGBTQ is a contentious one because they say leave that out of schools.
100%. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. How on earth do you leave that out of schools and treat everybody with dignity and respect? They exist.
Yeah.
They're here. Just because you don't want to acknowledge them doesn't mean that they are here.
Right. And as a clinical social worker, I get the fact, right, where I've had clients that come in and talk about struggling with their gender identity or struggling with their sexuality or doing those things, right? Everybody from young people all the way up. And so when we have to be able to say, like, we can't sweep that under the rug, right?
Yeah.
And whatever you believe about the LGBTQ, some people think, oh, it's a mental disorder. I've heard that. Or I've heard that it's, a choice. And it's all those things.
Do you think it's a choice?
Oh, absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, that's good.
No.
Breathing easy now. All right.
No.
All right, that's good.
No, I think from a clinical standpoint, I think that somebody doesn't wake up one morning and sit there and say, "Oh, I think I'm going to be gay,"
Yeah.
or I think I'm trans.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the case. And I think that there's a lot of data that would suggest and research that suggests that it's not a choice. And so so to me, to make the decision, and I love what Pope Francis said several years ago when he said, "Who am I to judge?" Right? And so I think that's very relevant to this point. So creating an ordinance that protects people that are in vulnerable classes, I think is really, really important. And if we're pro-life, then we support anti-hate crime and non-discrimination type support.
You're making it harder to not be against pro-life, because that's just that's
so that's where I stand.
Yeah.
So if I say I'm pro-life, I'm pro-life across the board. There's you cannot have, but in this case.
So are you against death penalty?
That one's a little nuanced for me.
Sure, but if pro-life matches the definition you've set out, then you would have to be.
Yeah, it's hard for me sometimes because I don't think death is wrong or killing someone is wrong, whether it's an individual or the government, right? And so it has to be, for me, in the death penalty, has to be very extreme cases where that would happen, where that would be very few. Should be very limited if that's what the case is. And I think that trying to have, like, let's take Texas for instance, they have, executions very regularly, right?
Yeah.
State of Wyoming has not. I think the last time we had that was in the 1990s.
Oh wow!
Is when we had the last execution.
Good place to commit serious crime.
Yeah.
There you go.
So with that being said, I think it has to be like that. I would rather see less types of things, but it would have to be a very extreme case of people that have terrorist actions where somebody, where they're like Oklahoma City bombing or something like that.
It'd
have to be that extreme. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm there with you there.
Yeah. And that's a centrist. If you see that's really kind of my centrist view, is it doesn't follow one path, but I can also have diverging understanding of certain things. And being able to, I can meld this and be like, this is what we can do to understand where I'm coming from. Does that make sense?
You're the first person that's ever said, yeah, those conflict, and I acknowledge that. And I'm gonna think about that when I leave here, because what are you supposed to say?
Well, this conversation would be pointless if you and I sat and I didn't take away the conversation. So like you're saying, so what you did, which is really cool, is that you said, well, that makes me kind of think about, pro-life. And that's the whole point of this. And I'm going to walk away from the conversation. I hear what you're saying about marijuana. I hear what you're saying about how our faith conflicts with our policy within government, that separation of church and state. That is what I think is what this conversation, when we talk about how politics and government should be, this is exactly what it is.
Yeah, and thank you again for allowing me the one-on-one opportunity. I don't know, standing in line at the town hall seemed daunting. So. And then I wouldn't have gotten to ask so many questions.
Well, yeah, and I think what you're doing is exactly what we should be doing, is having hard conversations.
Yeah.
And then also looking at it and a standpoint that I'm not going to hide behind the idea that, I better say the right thing, because if I don't say the right thing, then I'm not going to get reelected.
Well, now you're just buttering me up right now.
Well, but I think that's been my philosophy for years. And I will say what I feel from the dais as mayor. People that interview me, I will say what I believe is right.
Yep.
And I'll stand by my convictions on those things. But I'm also not so tone deaf that I won't listen to people and where they're coming from.
I feel very heard. I appreciate it. Why do you think you were elected mayor? How'd your life path bring you here?
I've always had a passion for macro work, meaning the broad policy.
Yeah.
My dad was involved in politics. He worked with a state legislator, and he also worked with, when he became an ambassador to Guatemala under George Bush the first.
Oh, that's cool.
The first one, George H.W. Bush. So my dad got me involved in that. I started working a little bit, mentoring under Tom Stroke, who my dad worked for, the ambassador, and helped out. And so I got involved in that, got involved in school politics, ran for student body president.
But why did people choose you?
Yeah.
Like, what about you?
I think people understand that, and this is what you'll hear about me, I think, in the community, that I am pragmatic. I will listen to both sides.
Yeah.
I make my decisions based on facts, research, data. I don't rush to make ideological decisions. I make decisions based upon those types of things that I think can benefit the community. So I work well together. I'm a collaborative individual, and I'm a build bridger, and so I consensus builder, and so that's really why people, I think, appreciate my type of politics.
Do you have any bigger aspirations? State government, national politics?
So I ran for the state legislature a few years ago. I ran against Chuck Gray. I don't know if you know Chuck Gray, our Secretary of State.
Okay.
So I ran against him for House District 57, and I lost because this was my stance. This is who I was, right?
Yeah.
Pretty traditional conservative, but more in the middle, moderate, centrist. And he's a Freedom Caucus.
Yep.
And so he's been endorsed by Trump and so forth. And so that's how I came, and I lost. And that's because, but you know what? I can go to sleep at night knowing and look my children in the eyes, and I know that I stood for what I believed in.
That's what's up. That you can respect, no matter who you are. So that's pretty cool.
And I think that's why people elected me for city council so many times, being elected mayor 3 times. That to me speaks volumes about my character and who I am as a person.
Why does that, very briefly, because we're running out of time, I have a lot of stuff to ask you about. Why does that work on a local level and not on a state level?
That's a great question. That's why I like local. And you asked me if I was going to run for state. I would never take that off the board. I would never say that I wouldn't run for something. I don't think I'd run for the state legislature, but would I run for something more? Possibly. I'll never take that off the table.
Sure.
But I think...
Spoken like a politician.
No, that I will say. Because I haven't made any decisions.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's the honest truth. The other side of it is that when we look at why it works better at the local, is because of this. Right here. We have more contact. People can see me in the coffee shop.
Right.
They can talk to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I like local government.
Which brings up my next question.
Sure.
You ever talk to Barrasso, Loomis, or Hageman?
I have, yeah. Matter of fact, we were just down in D.C. The city of Casper went to D.C. to kind of talk about some things that would benefit our municipalities.
Speaking about being around the community and talking to people, why won't they come talk to us? Hageman had one town hall in Laramie. Our national representation is like, screw you guys. I'm doing what Trump wants me to do. F your feelings, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Why can't they talk to us? Can you get them to come to Casper, please? I have a lot of things to say to them.
So I will say this about Barrasso.
And Barrasso won't come on my podcast either. He's ignoring me.
Well, let me give you 2 points.
Okay.
So John, Senator Barrasso, comes in every weekend to Casper, basically. He always flies in. Okay. So he'll come into Casper.
Does he fly private or?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. He does come in every weekend to Casper, basically. This is his home. And you'll see him out in the community. You'll see him at the fundraisers. You'll see him all those things. And so he does. I will give him that. I think sometimes one of the things that I disagree with him on is that I think sometimes he tries to avoid those more tough conversations, like by not doing a lot of these types of interviews or having tough conversations. Like if I went to him and I said, you know what, I disagree with what's going on at the federal level, and push back. Sometimes he'll avoid that conversation.
How? I'm sorry, but you're not the right person for the job if you're not going to have the tough conversation.
Well, he won't have that conversation.
Right.
He can wiggle through. You know what I mean?
He's so good at it because he's been doing it so long. He can just avoid.
Right.
And that's my biggest problem with him is that he is now nationally focused because he's third in line or whatever for Speaker of Senate Majority Leader. So but stop, you forget about us a little bit.
And that is the problem with no term limits. Is that politicians get entrenched in government and in elected positions, and then nothing changes. So when you have individuals that are staying in for 40 plus years and they're in their 80s, how can they represent us? I would be for term limits. I think term limits are good for democracy. I think it's good for change, for new ideas. I'm not running again for a 4th term.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be changes in ideas because they become entrenched.
What about Loomis? She won't. She's never set foot in Casper.
Yeah, I don't know Loomis very well. We did meet in D.C. and just very briefly, but mostly with her staff. And so I don't know Hageman or Loomis very well. Lummis. But I will say...
Lummis. I've been saying that wrong the whole time.
No. Yeah, Lummis.
I was saying Hageman before somebody corrected me, yeah.
I will say this, when I met Representative Hageman, she was very direct. Yeah. She said, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. I appreciated that honesty
Yeah.
and that straightforwardness, which is, I think, different than some people that you hear from in politics. And so I did appreciate that. While I do disagree with certain things with Representative Hageman, I respect the fact that she was like, nope, tell me what you guys need for the city, tell me what you need for your municipality, and then we'll see what we can do.
I do like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And she's the only person that came here, so that checks out with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I disagree with her in certain ideological things, right?
Yeah.
But I can respect that she would come in and be able to do that. And it changed my idea of who she was, too.
Oh. So what's one tangible way you've made my life better? I live in your... I'm very happy to ask you this question. I ask every politician I interview this question, and it's never applied to me. You're my mayor.
Yeah.
We voted you into office. What have you done to make my life better? Tangible, boom on the table.
Yeah, that's a good question. In the 12 years that I've been on city council, I can probably look at to say, how have we really changed the lives of our community?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm most proud of, that what we've done to help our community, is that we've looked at how we support individuals. So let me give you an idea. Marion Kreiner Pool. This is one thing that we look at. Marion Kreiner Pool.
Oh, okay.
Which is in North Casper.
Yep.
And I'm going to come back. I know we got a second here. I'm going to answer your question, I promise. Over at Marion Kreiner, we know that in North Casper is much more housing insecurity. We know that there's poverty. The school over there has 80 or 90% free reduced lunch. What we've done over there, we've made the commitment to say we're going to charge less and sometimes even free so kids can go use it. Here's what I love about our community, what we've done for individuals like yourself, is that we've worked really hard to make this a community where you can come here to love, be a part of all the amenities that we do. You can be a part of the mount. You can go to the mountain. We've worked really hard to maintain that. We've worked really hard to work on our downtown, where we can create more community, where you can come to David Street Station and we can work together and talk together. I feel like those are the tangible things that you can hold on to. And I really feel like we've represented fiscally responsibly and trying to keep taxes low for you guys.
Okay, so you've the pool. I heard the pool. You made the pool free for low income kids.
Yeah.
That's a tangible thing. I appreciate that.
So the other thing that I think that we've really supported is our 5th cent. The 5th cent tax, which you pay for, but it goes back to you. It helps with roads. It helps with nonprofits. That support.
I have no problem with that. People that have a problem with the 5th cent need to move to Los Angeles. You get it from the city, the county, the state, and the feds. That's so fun.
To me, it's a partnership that we've worked together to make this a better place for you, tangibly.
Yes.
So all the things that we do, that the 6th cent that we just passed, it's going to help a ton of different things within a new animal shelter. It's going to help with all these new...
Is it going to get the Wi-Fi online consistently?
That's a good question.
Can we do something about that, Mr. Mayor, please?
That's on Blue Peak and Verizon and Spectrum.
Take them on. Take on the big corporations.
They have come to talk to the city council, by the way.
If you talk to them again, tell them we're not happy.
No, they know too.
Okay.
We've told them. Yeah. But I think for the tangible things that we have created, is the only thing that I can really say is that we've created a community that is supportive of individuals, that have created amenities that people can take advantage of, and being able to be a part of that to make your life better here. That includes mental health access. That includes the nonprofits that support individuals that need it.
Right on. Do you have any mayoral superpowers? If you get pulled over, you get a ticket. I don't know. What else goes on?
No. There's no superpowers within that. I'm an everyday citizen. I have to abide by all the laws and
no smoking pot in the office.
No. I'm law abiding, but that doesn't mean that I won't get into good trouble. Meaning, I won't just go and be able to do things that are going to get me a little bit in trouble and to push back on things that are traditionally beliefs. And so,
right on.
And I don't feel like I answered your question very well. I'm going to be honest about what I have done or what the community has done for you. And I'm going to ask you if you give me a little bit of time to think about that a little bit better.
Sure, yeah. I like that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I don't think I answered it very well.
Best answer I've ever gotten to that question, I was interviewing a mayor of Blanding, Utah, one of the last dry cities in America.
Oh, yeah.
And he said when I took office, half of our population didn't have access to clean drinking water, and they do now.
Yeah.
And then he stopped talking, and I was like, whoa. Okay, yeah, you're right. That is a tangible thing that you have done. Water.
And I could make the case too, I guess. I could make the case that creating the LGBTQ non-discrimination ordinance.
Yeah, no, I would take that. I would take
directly
that.
benefits you, someone in another faith.
Great. Now my mayor's calling me gay.
No,
That's awesome.
no.
No, I'm not offended. It's okay. It's okay.
Look at the whole. Look at the whole ordinance. It from creed to race to sexual identity to sexual gender. It kind of hits the whole aspect.
Well, you heard it here first. Mayor Pacheco thinks I'm gay. Thank you very much for your time.
Brother.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Anytime you need to talk, just chat with me. So.
Sweet. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got my cell phone too, right?
I do now.
Yep.
That's cool.
Perfect.
I ring you up. All right, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely.